Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Dalaran hovered high above the world of Azeroth, its spires cutting through the mist, a majestic beacon of arcane power. The city, once a symbol of unity among mages, now felt cold and isolated to Jaina Proudmoore. As she walked through the great halls of the Violet Citadel, her footsteps echoed, almost drowned by the faint hum of magic coursing through the very stone. She had spent much of her life within these walls, but lately it felt as though she was a stranger in her own home. Her grip tightened around the staff she carried, not out of necessity, but as a reminder of the power she still wielded. Yet power felt distant, as did the trust of her fellow mages. Ever since the fall of Thurnomore and the decisions she had made in the heat of war, the once unwavering support from her peers had begun to fray. Her name was whispered with caution and her leadership questioned. Jaina was used to carrying the weight of responsibility, but the isolation cut deeper than she cared to admit. The council meeting that morning had only made it worse. Karel'thas Sunstrider, the former prince of the Blood Elves, had returned to Dalaran with grand promises of aid. The council, or what was left of its once wise leadership, seemed eager to hear him out. Jaina, however, was not convinced. There was something in Karel'thas's eyes that unsettled her, a darkness she couldn't quite play. He was no longer the prince who had once fought for a noble cause. The Karel'thas she saw now had been consumed by ambition, driven by his people's desperation and his own lust for power. Jaina, you can carry all of this on your own. A familiar voice interrupted her thought. Khadgar stepped out of the shadows, his ageless face lined with the wisdom of countless battles. Though younger in appearance than his years would suggest, Khadgar's aura was one of immense power tempered by caution. She gave him a tight smile, but it did little to mask her wariness. I know Khadgar, but it seems that no one in Dalaran sees the truth about Karel'thas. He said, up to something. Khadgar nodded thoughtfully, his brows furrowed. I agree, the council is blind to his manipulation. He's sealed, promising them artifacts and magic that could rival anything they've ever seen. It's easy for the desperate to be seduced by such offer. Even if it costs them everything they stand for, Jaina added bitterly. She turned to the window overlooking the city below, her mind racing. We need to expose him, Khadgar, but with the council already divided, I fear we may not have many allies. Khadgar moved beside her, his gaze following hers out over the shimmering cityscape. We've erred in worse situations, Jaina, but we will need to act swiftly. If Khadgar gains full control of the council, it won't be long before Dalaran is turned into his personal weapon. Jaina's fingers traced the smooth surface of her staff, her thoughts drifting back to the many battles she had fought. This was different. This wasn't about brute force or grand army. This was a battle for hearts and minds, a political struggle she wasn't sure she was ready for, but ready or not, she had no choice. The day wore on, and by evening, Jaina found herself in the archives of the Violet Citadel, searching through ancient texts that detailed the history of magical councils and the governance of arcane power. Khadgar had gone to speak with a few of the council members he still trusted, but Jaina knew they would need more than just words to turn the tide against Khadgar. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion when a soft knock echoed through the chamber. She glanced up to see a young apprentice, wide-eyed and hesitant. Lady Proudmoore, the boy stammered. I was told to deliver this to you. He handed her a sealed letter, its edges marked with a familiar sigil, the Sunstrider crest. Jaina's stomach twisted. She broke the seal and unfurled the parchment, reading the elegant yet chilling script. Lady Proudmoore, I see you have your suspicions, and I see you struggle with them. Meet me in the Hall of Mysteries tonight. There are things you do not understand, but I will show you the truth. Bring no one, you will not be harmed. Karel'thas Sunstrider. Jaina's heart raced. It was a trap, surely, but one she couldn't ignore. Karel'thas was daring her to face him alone, confident in whatever twisted game he was playing. She considered showing the letter to Khadgar, but something told her this confrontation had to happen on her own terms. If she could get Karel'thas to reveal his plan, perhaps she could use it to sway the council. As midnight approached, Jaina made her way to the Hall of Mysteries, her steps silent but deliberate. The hall was one of the oldest chambers in Dalaran, filled with arcane relics and forgotten spells. The air crackled with latent magic, and Jaina could feel the weight of centuries of knowledge pressing down on her. Karel Fast stood at the far end of the hall, his back to her, examining a floating orb of swirling energy. He looked almost serene, bathed in the dim light of the hall's magical torches, but Jaina knew better. "You came," he said, without turning, his voice smooth and laced with arrogance. "I don't have time for games, Karastalos," Jaina replied coldly, her grip tightening on her staff. "What do you want?" "What I want, Jaina, is what I have always wanted. To save my people. The Blood Elves cannot survive much longer without a stable source of magic. The Council is too blind to see it, but Dalaran said power could be that source." "You mean you plan to drain Dalaran?" Dry Jaina shot back. "You were not here to help the Council, you were here to control it." Kareltas smirked. "Control is merely a means to an end. You know this as well as I do. Power is not something to be shared, Jaina. It must be wielded by those strong enough to use it." Jaina felt a surge of anger rise within her, but she forced herself to remain calm. "You all destroyed Dalaran in the process. The Eye of Eternity, you replanning to use it, aren't you?" Kelthea's eyes flickered for a moment, and Jaina knew she had struck a nerve. "The Eye of Eternity," he said slowly, "is the key to everything. A nexus of pure magic that could save not only my people, but this entire world. Or destroy it." Jaina countered. "You can control that kind of power, Coralthas. No one can." Kyle stepped closer, his voice soft but menacing. "That's where you were wrong, Jaina. I've already begun soon. The Council will be mine, and Dalaran will become the beacon of hope it was meant to be. You could still join me, together we could reshape this world." For a brief moment, Jaina felt the weight of his words. The temptation to seize control to make things right in her own way was strong. But she had seen the cost of such ambition before. She had seen it in Arthas and Garrosh, and now in Karlthas' power, corrupted, and it always demanded more. "I'll never join you," she said, her voice steady. Karlthas sighed as though he had expected her answer all along. "Then I suppose you leave me no choice." Before Jaina could react, Karlthas raised his hands and the air around her crackled with arcane energy. A trap. She'd walked right into it. Jaina's instincts kicked in as Karel's spell tore through the air toward her. She threw up a shimmering barrier, just in time to deflect the blast of arcane energy, but the force of it sent her stumbling back. She could feel the raw power radiating from Karel's, and it was more dangerous than she had anticipated. "You should have accepted my offer, Jaina." Karel's sneered, his voice cold and sharp as he launched another volley of spells. "Now you'll be nothing more than a footnote in history." Jaina gritted her teeth, countering with a blast of frost that collided with his magic in a crackling explosion of ice and energy. She felt her pulse quicken as she shifted between offensive and defensive spells, keeping Karel's at bay. The room around them became a blur of light and sound, ancient relics shaking and shattering as the duel intensified. She knew she couldn't keep this up forever. Karel's had the advantage of preparation, and his power was bolstered by whatever dark magic he'd been dabbling in. Jaina could feel the corruption in his spells, the sinister undercurrent that reminded her of the dangers of unchecked ambition. But she was no stranger to powerful opponents. Years of fighting had honed her skills, and despite her isolation in Dalaran, she was still one of the most formidable mages alive. Karel's attacks grew more desperate as Jaina countered each one, her precision cutting through the chaos. For all his arrogance, he hadn't expected her to hold her ground this long. With a sharp flick of her wrist, she summoned a torrent of arcane missiles, forcing Karel's to retreat. "You were delusional if you think you can control the Eye of Eternity," Jaina shouted over the roar of magic. "It will consume you." Karel fast laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "The Eye is the future. It is the only way to save Azeroth from its own decay. You were too blinded by your guilt to see the truth." Jaina's heart pounded as she pressed her attack, pushing Karel's back step by step. His words stung not because she believed them, but because they echoed the doubts she had wrestled with since Theramore. Was she blinded by her past? Was her resistance to Karel's just another manifestation of her fear of making the same mistake? A flicker of doubt almost slowed her movements, but she shook it off. This wasn't about her. This was about stopping Karel's from unleashing untold devastation on Dalaran and possibly the world. But even as she fought, she realized Karel's wasn't alone in this. His influence had already spread through the Council, and if he managed to control them fully, his plan would be unstoppable. She had to end this. Now, Jaina gathered her strength, her hands glowing with arcane power. She whispered a spell under her breath, one of the most potent and dangerous she knew. It would take everything she had, but it might be enough to bring Karos down before he could cause any more damage. As she began to cast, Thal's eyes widened in realization. He hurled a desperate wave of fire toward her, but Jaina's shield absorbed the brunt of it as she completed the incantation. The room trembled as a massive surge of energy erupted from her hands, engulfing Coral in a vortex of arcane force. For a moment, he was lost in the storm of magic, his figure flickering in and out of view. Then with a final flash of light, it was over. Thal's was on his knees, panting, his power drained. His once gleaming armor was scorched and dented, his face twisted in fury and frustration. He looked up at Jaina, and for the first time since their confrontation began, she saw something other than arrogance in his eyes, fear. "You think this is over?" he rasped, his voice weak but defiant. "You haven't won anything. The council will still fall, and Dalaran will be mine." Jaina approached him slowly, her staff glowing with the remnants of her spell. "No, Karel, that is, your time here is over. You've already lost." Before he could respond, a flash of light filled the room, and Khadgar appeared, his presence immediately filling the chamber with a sense of calm authority. "Jaina," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "The Council Tales has already made his move. We need to act now if we were going to stop him." Jaina nodded, her eyes never leaving Thas. He sank finished. "But the Council may not be." Khadgar stepped forward, binding Thas with a spell of containment, locking his magic away before helping Jaina up. "We need to expose the truth. If the Council sees what Thas was planning, they'll have no choice but to stand against him." The two mages moved quickly, leaving Thas under guard as they made their way back to the Council chamber. The halls of Dalaran were eerily quiet, the tension thick in the air as they approached the grand door. Inside, the Council members were already in heated debate, Thas supporters speaking in fervent tones about the necessity of his plan to save the Blood Elf. It was clear that his influence had taken root deeply, and if they didn't act now, it might be too late. Jaina stepped forward, her voice ringing through the chamber. "Council members, you are being deceived." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Khadgar stood beside her, his presence lending weight to her word. "I've just come from confronting Thas," Jaina continued. "He has been using all of us to further his own goal. He planned to use the Eye of Eternity to seize control of Dalaran, and in doing so, he would have destroyed everything we stand for." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, but Jaina pressed on. "This isn't about saving the Blood Elf. It's about power. Thas' thirst for control has already corrupted him, and if we allow his plan to continue, it will corrupt Dalaran as well." One of the older council members, Archmage Madara, stood, her voice wavering but firm. "These are serious accusations. Jaina, do you have proof?" Khadgar stepped forward, producing the magical containment spell that held Thas' dark energy. "We have more than proof. Thas has already been subdued. You will face judgment for his crimes, but you must see the danger he posed to all of us." The council erupted into a mixture of shock and outrage. Some of Thas supporters looked as though they had been slapped, their loyalty shaken by the revelation. Others demanded justice, their voices rising in a cacophony of emotion. Jaina waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "Dalaran has always stood as a beacon of magic and wisdom, not a tool for one person's ambition. We cannot let one man's hunger for power destroy everything we have built." For a moment the room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Then, slowly, Archmage Madara nodded. "You're right. We've lost sight of what Dalaran truly is. We cannot allow ourselves to be divided any longer." With the council beginning to shift back toward unity, Jaina felt a weight lift from her shoulder. The battle had been hard fought, but it wasn't over yet. They still had to undo the damage Thas had done, and it would take time to rebuild the trust that had been broken. But for the first time in a long while, Jaina felt hope. Dalaran could be whole again. As the council members began discussing how to proceed, Jaina turned to Khadgar, her eyes tired but resolute. "Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you." Khadgar smiled warmly, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You've always had the strength, Jaina. You just needed to remember it." Together, they left the council chamber, the city of Dalaran bathed in the soft glow of magic as dawn broke on the horizon. There was still much work to be done, but for now they had secured a future for Dalaran, one that Jaina knew would be worth fighting for.